Welcome everyone to the JFK Junior Forum for tonight's Jock the Vote debate. That's right. First off, I'd like to thank the Institute of Politics for hosting tonight's event, and the National Campaign Committee here at the IOP and H-Vote for all the voter education and turnout efforts they've put forth here on campus. If you have any questions, anyone in the audience, if you want to ask a question of our panels here tonight, there are pieces of paper and pens spread about. Just write them down, turn them in. Should be fun. All right, and as we all know, this is a very important election with issues that relate to each and every one of us. So for this reason, it's very important for us as the youth of America to be informed and excited about our role in the political process. And that's why we're here tonight. So without further ado, I give you the Jock the Vote panels. For the Republicans, we have Mark Adamanis of the lightweight crew team, Hope Jones of the women's lacrosse team, Christian Ayers from track and field. And for the Democrats, we have Betsy McCormick of the Ratcliffe crew team, Mr. Dylan Reese of the hockey team, and Reva Menkoff of the sailing team. And lastly, I'd like to introduce tonight's special guest moderator, Mr. Chris Nowinski, or you may know him as Chris Harvard from the WWE.
Thank you very much. It is an honor to be here at the Institute of Politics. Not a place I got too much as an undergrad here in my days. I'm class of 2000 and a former jock myself, played in the football team. And it's a wonderful thing to see all these young people motivated to be involved in politics. You know, I was talking to my roommate the other day who happens to be a former hard football player himself, and we were talking about we always get fired up and get in arguments about politics these days. And he said, you know, it's funny how we didn't do this stuff as undergrads. We spent too much time in the weight room, you know, and neither of us got really fired up about politics. And so when I was 18 and I was a freshman here, I didn't vote myself. And I only learned through students like this and forums like this that the political process is important to me, important to everyone. And so that's how I became the political correspondent for WWE SmackDown Your Vote program. For those, it's first ever. And I distinctly think it's because they have a Harvard graduate on their roster. They created the position. But I've had a great chance to go motivate young people. I've had a chance to go to all the conventions, the debates. I found myself sitting next to Ralph Nader in the University of Miami cafeteria, which he'd never get a seat either. But you know, I had a chance to MC the Rock the Vote concerts, and we've been going out all over the place. And as the people at the IOP told me, the youth college turnout is expected to be higher than ever before this year, so that's terrific. And I want to say it's very special to come back to Harvard because I've been moderating debates all over the country, and you know, I think we're going to get a much more substantive debate here at the University of Miami. We kind of fell apart when the students got bogged down on whether they supported taste great or less filling. So, just playing around, guys. It's Jock the Vote. We're having a little fun. So, we have prepared questions for these young intellectuals, and I would like to dive into them. They will have the person I asked the question to will have 2 minutes to respond, and then there will be a 1-minute rebuttal by an opponent. So the first question I'm going to ask to Dylan of the Democrats, and I will expect a rebuttal from Christian, who will have the opportunity to rebut. The first section, we'll have 4 sections tonight. The first one will be on the economy. The economy is the number one concern of young people in this election. There are about 28 million young people between the ages of 18 to 24. 9 million of those in college are wondering how they'll get good jobs when they graduate and how they're going to be able to pay off their student loans. The 14 million of those who don't go to college wonder how they'll be able to get a job, you know, with manufacturing jobs going overseas. And the remaining 5 million who will get some college education are worried about it on both sides. So the question is, we hear a lot about job loss and outsourcing, but not so much about young people who are graduating from school and trying to get jobs. What is your candidate going to do to build a strong job market for young people and create new jobs for people who are losing them? And what about outsourcing jobs to other countries? Is this a good thing?
Thank you, Chris. First, I've prepared some Bush fun facts here. So, Since President Bush took office, the administration's lost over 1 million jobs, and he's actually the first president to lose jobs since Herbert Hoover back during the Depression time. So I think that speaks volumes for how the administration has done in the job department. And also today, they're not creating enough jobs to fit the influx of new workers. So they're really not doing a good job to combat that. Part of the problem is Bush's tax code encourages companies to outsource. Chris talked about outsourcing, and as we know, it's the movement of workers, people that would be working in the United States, companies going overseas, and therefore people here losing jobs. And is outsourcing a bad or good idea? I think at the time right now, with the the current state of the economy, it's probably not a good idea. Could it be in the future a good idea? Possibly, but right now, no. President Bush's rebuttal on outsourcing has been that people here in the United States should get better education, go to college, and therefore would be more prepared for more skilled jobs and not the manufacturing jobs that have been going overseas. But in the debates, Kerry criticized Bush for not giving enough money to the No Child Left Behind, which was something that Bush had proposed that all kids, should have basically equal amount of schooling. And he also has cut the amount of grants that college students have gotten. So I don't see how they're going to get that education to find those new skilled jobs. And another thing, to answer the other question about what Senator Kerry will do, is he will cut taxes for businesses here in the United States that have been outsourcing jobs. So therefore, people here will be able to keep their jobs because the companies will have, more money. Okay.
Yeah, that means 15 more seconds if you want.
Okay, well, a couple other things he had talked about is investing in jobs of tomorrow, such as new cars, new products, high-efficiency cars, high-grade steel, investing in products like that, and enforcing trade agreements that haven't been enforced properly by the Bush administration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dylan. Christian, your rebuttal, sir.
Thank you. First off, I'd like to say that there is not people say that we have a loss of jobs. There has been a loss of jobs. But if you look at the unemployment rate, right now it's at 5.4%, which is actually below the historical average for unemployment. So I really don't think there's a shortage of jobs. And Senator Kerry says that the reason because of this loss of jobs is because of outsourcing. He says that outsourcing is bad. Outsourcing really, if you look at it from an economic standpoint and from a human standpoint, it's not bad. We outsource jobs, but we actually insource more jobs, and there's actually been an increase in the amount of insourced jobs, which is where there's jobs created in the United States from foreign companies. Actually, 2.8 million jobs have been outsourced, but 4.6 million jobs have been insourced. And these insourced jobs actually pay higher because they're manufacturing jobs. The outsourcing jobs we send out are to places like India, and we send out low-level tech jobs, which are very low-paying or white-collar. The types of jobs that are insourced are manufacturing jobs, which tend to pay higher. Also, let's see. There are many firms many companies in the United States that are based that have
15 seconds.
That have the majority of their business out of the. If we were to close this, many businesses in the United States would go out of business, and there'd be many jobs that are lost. I guess that's all the time I have.
Thank you very much. We're going to jump around categories here today, so we're going to hop into national security in Iraq, because obviously this is the second most important issue according to the polling, most important for a lot of people. With 70% of enlisted personnel aged 30 or younger in our military, U.S. military decisions significantly affect young people. The National Guard and reservists are serving multiple tours of duty, and yet we don't have systems in place so their families are taken care of and their jobs are there when they return. And with the stop-loss policy, we have a backdoor draft. The question, which I'll ask to Hope, and I will enjoy a rebuttal from Reva, please, is what is your candidate's long-term plan for Iraq, and is it realistic? Was regime change in Iraq an essential part of the war on terrorism, or has it left us weaker against threats, including North Korea, Iran, and those still in Afghanistan?
Thank you. Well, George Bush sees the war in Iraq as an essential part on the war on terror. The problem that we have with this enemy that I think both sides can agree on is that they hate the very principles we stand on as a nation, our freedom, our democracy. and they will do anything to destroy or break down modern Western culture. The issue with countries like Iraq, Iran, Libya, Syria is that they are radical, out of control, and like Afghanistan's and Iraq's cases, failed states. It is in this anarchy that terrorist organizations can find safe haven and acquire weapons to carry out their acts of terror and violence. Our intelligence services tell us that there were definite ties between al-Qaeda and the government of Saddam Hussein, and in order to fight the war on terror, it is important to understand that we must root out states that support these terrorists and provide them with weapons of mass destruction, funding, and training. It is these states that not only have the potential, but do in fact put weapons of mass destruction into the hands of terrorists. We have intelligence of transactions between Pakistan, Iran, and Libya of weapons of mass destruction. It is estimated that there are as many 20,000 insurgents fighting us in Iraq, and of those 20,000, 5,000 are foreign terrorists, such as people who have brought in from other countries from the groups of Iraq, and of al-Qaeda and Hamas. These groups are continuing to fight us, and if we leave now, if we pull out as Kerry has proposed in 6 months, we are at greater risk of them grabbing hold of power in these states. It's better to fight them there than on our own soil.
Thank you very much. You have 1 minute, Riva.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. I think the facts, speak for themselves. The Bush went to war for reasons, and the points that the reasons he said he was going because there was this link between al-Qaeda and Saddam. Intelligence since then has shown, and in fact, I believe the Bush administration even admitted that there is no proven link between al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein, and that the weapons of mass destruction which the Bush administration claimed that Iraq had are not there. So, and that he was that he started removing those weapons of mass destruction after the Gulf War. So, as a result, the reasons that we went to war in Iraq are reasons that were untrue, and as a result, Bush deceived the American people. Kerry will kind of reestablish the trust that America needs to have in their leaders. In addition, part of the issue is that the Bush doctrine is a doctrine of preemptive war, which is a fundamental difference between Bush and Kerry. It could be a problem, so we might as well go there and get rid of the administration because we don't agree with them. And that really isn't a way to make foreign policy. Kerry will focus on alliances and creating a system amongst the world where America has reestablished its trust both with its own citizens and with its neighbors, which is probably the most important thing we can do.
Thank you very much, Riva. All right, now we are going to jump over to social issues. We have a few social issues on the agenda tonight. This first question I will ask to Betsy, and I would please like Mark to respond. We live in the first community that allowed gay marriage, right here in Cambridge. What is your candidate's position on that issue, and what do you believe the role of the government should be? And extra points if you mention Mary Cheney is a lesbian.
Right. In that case,
Seems
Dick
to come
Cheney's
up in
daughter
these
is a
debates,
lesbian. Kerry, like Bush, is anti-gay marriage. However, he does believe in civil unions that can take place between two men or two women. And he believes in benefits for both of these, for both partners. For example, pension access, health insurance, all of this. Bush is against gay marriage or even gay civil unions, mostly on a religious ground, and that's how he defends it, which is fine for him, but he has no right to impose his religious beliefs on the rest of us. He's claiming there's this grand sanctity of marriage that we should be upholding, but who's to say what marriage should consist of? It's more than just producing children, and there are many other benefits that we should all have access to regardless of sexual orientation. Another thing about Kerry is that he believes in a federal ban against job discrimination based on sexual orientation. Same vein.
No, thank you. Mark, your rebuttal, please.
Thanks, Chris. Neither candidate will say that they are for gay marriages, but like a lot of other of Kerry's positions, the kind of nuance and attempt to toe the middle ground really disguises what is essentially a pretty textbook liberal position. He's not for gay marriage per se, because that's not a politically tenable position, but he's for civil unions and for any of the other benefits that are going to be associated with marriage. he won't take a position in favor of the federal marriage amendment, which is the only real way that I've seen proposed to actually defend the institution of marriage. Like we've in the state of Massachusetts, judges who seem to be confused about what the purpose of their job is have taken it upon themselves to legislate things into the Constitution that really haven't been there. And while it's not the optimum way to really pass legislation such as an amendment, the current functioning of our justice system has really kind of necessitated it. Plenty of judges will take it upon themselves to read whatever they want to the Constitution, and an amendment that codifies marriage as between a man and a woman is the only real way that I see. And President Bush has also said this to actually defend the institution of marriage, which has been one of the central institutions in our society for our entire history, both as a nation and as a culture in Western civilization.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to jump to education, a very important issue, obviously, to this crowd, because, as we mentioned before, although young people are generally more educated than they used to be, still more than half of 18 to 24-year-olds don't go to college. College tuition also continues to increase faster than income. 70% of people work part-time or full-time, and 93% have credit card with an average debt of $3,000. I am still paying off my loans. The question, which will go to Betsy and will be rebutted by Hope, is does your candidate have a plan to make college more accessible and more affordable that works?
Yes, he does. Kerry has, he's one of his main points about education is that he wants to introduce a tax credit worth up to $4,000 to the cost of tuition for every year of college. Another thing is that the big grand educational plan in this country is Bush's No Child Left Behind, which I'm sure everyone has heard lots about. And one of the main problems with it, although in theory it's a wonderful idea, is that it simply is not funded. With respect to higher education, one of the main examples of this, there are grants called Pell Grants, which is the main way that underprivileged students are funded and allowed to go to college. And in 2000, Bush was running one of his main points was that he wanted to increase the minimum amount on that from about $4,000 to $5,000 for the third year in a row. That has not been included in his budget. He has continually broken that promise. Another issue is that research money is simply not being offered as it should to universities. That's one of their primary duties really in this country, is to fund medical and every type of research really you could imagine, and Bush again is not offering that money to happen. Back to the student side of things, Kerry has another plan where any student can go to a public university for 4 years completely free if they offer 2 years of service to the country. This doesn't necessarily imply military service, I don't mean to say that, but an example would be working, for example, in, I believe, hospitals and schools are 2 ways for the country. So that's another way that students are able to get an education. And he is trying to put funding back into these programs, which Bush has introduced, but is not actually supporting.
Thank you very much. Hope, what is George Bush going to do for college education?
Well, in terms of college education, Bush is intending to start more community colleges. He holds the belief that everyone has the right to go to college, and it is the individual responsibility to take up that right and go. And the state should neither force people nor pay their way. It's hugely important for a country that's trying to generate a labor force that's competitive internationally to have educated people. We are handicapping the U.S. if we do not produce well-educated children. Bush wants to fund community colleges so that those at the lower end of the economic spectrum can get a college education. There is responsibility for people to learn, to study, and to do well, and if people are not willing to work hard, then there's not much we can do for them. Welfare cannot give people motivation. They have to have it themselves. His programs and his philosophy about education is tough. he's tough on it. He wants public schools to be the best they can be, and he wants to give kids the opportunity to go where they can get the best education. It's been proven that Catholic schools in the same demographics of some public schools have produced better educated children on less money. So his philosophy is to penalize public schools that can't get the job done, can't turn out kids that are doing well. And his solution for children to continue on into college is to make a community college more readily available. It wasn't said anywhere that everyone had to go to Harvard. People whose parents make or who are not dependent under $60,000 get a free ride here. So, those who can do the work and who have proved themselves can get into a place like Harvard. But other than that, it's community colleges, and that's where they need to go.
Yes. Wouldn't it be nice if everyone was Harvard? Did anybody catch the Brooke Ellison story last night, by the way? Well, I recommend you guys see it. They talked about this. She was a class of 2000 with me. She was paralyzed from C2 down. And anyway, their family was poor, and they didn't think they could get into Harvard. They kind of went in on a lark, and when they went to Harvard, Harvard said, we took all that into account. We will make sure you can go here. And she spoke at my graduation. It's a wonderful story. So anyway, check it out. Wonderful woman. We're going to go back to the economy. This question's going to be for Christian. And Dylan, you will get a chance to respond. And I want some real dirt here. A lot of young people are living paycheck to paycheck, and the growth of cost of health insurance is far outpacing wage growth. 30% of young adults are without any health insurance at all. Does your candidate have a plan for dealing with both increased costs of health care and getting more people covered? And points will be given to any reference to UHS. And your answer.
I'll try to get it all in this time. Okay, the reason people can't afford health care is because health care premiums are rising at such a fast rate. Every year they're rising between 10 and 15% a year for each premium. I'm sure one of Dylan's fun Bush facts is going to be that now 45 million people can't afford health care. So I'll just take that out of his hand right now. So I'm just going to take that out. I'm going to say that first I'm going to go to what Kerry's plan is. Kerry's plan is actually a very complicated plan that I really can't understand going to the Kerry website. But the cost, he is very concrete on how much it's going to cost for the first 10 years. I've seen 2 or 3 estimates. One is the high end is going to be 1.5 trillion over the next 10 years. The low end is 1.1 trillion. Kerry actually rejected these and came up with a figure from one of his friend economists that was going to cost 652 billion. He says, but just say it's going to cost 1.1 billion. That's what an independent researcher found that it was going to cost at Emory University. And Kerry said he's going to pay for all these for his health care plan completely by rolling back the Bush tax cuts. Rolling back the Bush tax cuts only counts for $840 billion, which leaves a rough gap of $300 billion how he's going to pay for the health care program. He can't increase taxes on the middle class because he's already sworn that he won't do that. So there's a gap of $300 billion that he can't pay for his proposed health care plan. Also, Senator Kerry has no plan for halting the rise of the premiums. Every year, as I said, it goes up 10 to 15%. And according to Kerry's plan, in the first year, 10%, the average person will drop their premium by 10%. However, in a year, if the premiums continue to rise 10 to 15% a year, Kerry's plan won't even matter in a year. And Bush has a plan that actually is going to curb the upward rise in the cost of premiums. His number one strategy is through tort reform. Through President Bush's Tort Reform Act, he will be able to reduce the cost of health care in the United States by $28 billion in his first year, as opposed to Senator Kerry's $7 billion. Also, in addition, Bush intends to establish tax-free health care accounts to allow citizens to control their own health care, rather than have the government control their own health care, and to be able to set what doctors people see, the cost of those visits, as they do in other countries. Also, he's going to expand healthcare centers to allow healthcare centers to be able to go into underprivileged areas, and an estimated 6.1 million new people will be able to receive health care. And thirdly, he's going to continue to lower the cost of prescription drugs. President Bush promised when he was running in 2000 that he was going to lower the cost and he was going to put a prescription drug benefit. And he came through. He actually did what he said, which is something that I doubt that Senator Kerry is going to be able to do if you look at his record. That's it.
All right.
15,
you got 50 seconds if you want them. That bell's scaring you guys off. All right. Dylan, I want to hear some fun facts in this one, all right?
There's awfully a lot there. Okay. To begin, as Christian said, the price of premiums of healthcare are really rising. Now, whether that's the fault of Bush or Kerry, I don't know, and I'm not sure they do either. Because we're not in this debate. We were supposed to, give our own opinion, not necessarily the candidate's opinion. So, obviously, the Bush administration isn't doing everything great to combat that problem. The average rise in healthcare has been over $3,000 in the last 3 years per family. So, as you can see, we do have a huge problem, as Christian said. President Bush really hasn't looked into healthcare as much as he should. There's one simple fact. Actually, waste, well, as Kerry calls it, waste, which is paperwork and administration, accounts for 25% of healthcare, which is a pretty enormous number when, sorting of the waste and maybe getting rid of some of the, the paperwork that doesn't need to be there would give so much money back that could be, given to prescription drugs for seniors and to extend affordable health care to everybody. So that's one thing that Senator Kerry has talked about, that he feels like shouldn't take him much time, shouldn't take him much effort, and he will already be able to give that much money back to each person. Christian talked about it. Senator Kerry's plan is to plan to lower premiums for every family by $1,000 a year. So lower prescription drugs for seniors, extend affordable, high-quality health care to everybody that will cover 95% of Americans. And Senator Kerry has promised that every American will be covered by the same plans that cover people in Congress, which is, a pretty big promise to the American people, that they'll have the same health insurance that people in Congress are getting, and you would obviously assume that's the best. So that's Senator Kerry's plan.
Thank you very much. All right, since this is Jock the Vote debate, his question's for Riva. Bottom of the ninth inning, you're down by 2, 2 on, 2 out. Who do you want coming up to bat and why?
Which team?
No, I'm just kidding.
Manual test.
We don't want to go there. Actually, the next question's on stem cells, which is an important issue this year and basically will be for the rest of our lives. And Reeve, I want you to answer this, and Mark, please rebut. Please address your candidate's position on federal funding for embryonic stem cell research, and what do you believe the government's role should be?
Well, I think that stem cells are one of the most promising opportunities facing science today and facing medicine today. And for people who don't know much about the science behind this, stem cells are cells, kind of the basics of every embryo right at conception, and the stem cells can turn into any kind of cell. So you can put it in a heart, it becomes a heart cell. You can put it in the skin, it becomes a skin cell. It can be anything. And this poses incredible opportunities to cure diseases like heart disease, cancer, Parkinson's, diabetes, because these cells then develop from there. So you're not just getting one heart cell, you can create whole organs. And people have been cured slightly with the little bit that they've allowed people to accomplish. Parents have conceived embryos and been able to cure their children, and taking stem cells regenerate themselves. So there was a family who had a child, was able to use the stem cell to cure their son who was still alive, and they had another son who they could love just as much. And so the opportunities for this to cure rare diseases are endless and need to be explored. And Kerry is for some degree of stem cell research, which Bush is adamantly opposed to. And the ideology, the other thing is that Kerry's, a lot of Bush's objections to stem cell research are ideologically driven. And this will come up with a lot of the other moral issues, but a lot of Bush's beliefs about stem cells are based on Christianity and on moral principle. Does life begin at conception? Does life begin at birth? When does a life begin? And this is a chicken or the egg question, and people can go on and on and on debating about this forever, and that's fine. But America is a country that has kind of founded itself on people's differences and on allowing for different cultures and different religions and not having a state religion and things like that. And when you pass a legislation like this that is based almost entirely in moral grounds and ethical grounds that are your own, that's going against kind of the freedom of religion that America stands for. So as a result, I think it's important that we do lift some of the barriers that stand in the way of stem cell research and allow people to explore this opportunity and hopefully that way we will be able to create some cures for these diseases that kill millions, are cause for serious loss of life, and that could be cured if we allow this to develop.
Thank you. So Mark? Mark, this one's yours.
Stem cells are very promising as prospective cures for diseases, but the inconvenient fact in this debate is that adult stem cells are the most promising and have yielded the most results to date. The idea that the Kerry campaign has been propounding over the past several months that if Kerry's elected, all of a sudden we'll have these miracle cures for everything ranging from Parkinson's to spinal cord disorders is really quite disgraceful when it comes down to it. Any kind of cure for serious diseases involving fetal stem cells or embryonic stem cells are decades down the road. They're not. It's not as if over in the Science Center we have cures for Parkinson's cooked up and waiting to go as soon as Bush is thrown out of office. And the idea that Bush is adamantly opposed to all stem cell research is just flatly inaccurate. One of the few people remember it now. He gave a speech several weeks before September 11th, and at the time it was one of the few actions as president that he got some praise from both sides for. But he laid out actually a very reasonable middle of the ground position that stem cell research could proceed. It could get federal funding as long as it used tissues and stem cells that were already destroyed. There were 17 stem cell lines at the time, and I think they've since added 10 or 15 more. And all of this debate is occurring with the idea that Bush banned stem cell research. Even the stuff that he limited, that was only federal funding. As some of us may have read in the Crimson, Harvard itself is about to undertake stem cell research without any assistance from the federal government at all. And that's not something that I agree with, but it's certainly not something that President Bush is preventing Harvard from doing. If there are private organizations that want to pursue that kind of research to destroy human life, to perhaps cure diseases down the road, they're able to do that. Bush hasn't said that they can't, though he would disagree with that premise.
Thank you. All right, now we are at about the 12-minute mark, so if we have questions from the audience, I need to get them up here quickly. But the next question will be on national security in Iraq. We'll go to Hope, and rebuttal, please, from Riva. How does your candidate balance the cost of war in Iraq against the cost of domestic issues or programs that he's planning for the next 4 years?
Thanks. No one worried about the cost of World War II. You have to pay the cost of war, no question, hands down. The cost of war right now is about $119 billion and counting. It's certainly been expensive. And the question is will we let them bring the fight here, or will we bring it to them? The Bush team is working toward making Iraq self-sufficient in security and economic terms. The way to minimize the cost of rebuilding and fighting will be to get the country on its feet, both economically and in terms of security, meaning that their army can ensure that there will be no attacks against the state. As far as I can see, John Kerry wants to either put more troops in Iraq or to remove our soldiers from Iraq in 6 months and focus his attention on Afghanistan or on a cooperative or allied approach to the war on terror. We have plenty of resources to cover both Afghanistan and Iraq, and it is important to remember that less is more in the strategy of rebuilding and stabilizing both countries. The objective is to have the Afghanis and Iraqis defending themselves. It creates resentment if we throw, 100,000 more troops into the Middle East. We'll be seen as occupiers rather than people who are giving aid. Our job right now in Iraq particularly is to fight insurgents and train the armies of Iraq and Afghanistan. We have a policy of helping them to help themselves. This may take up to 5 years to be done effectively and completely, but it must be done. Removing our troops now creates a huge risk of the disintegration of the state and the ability for radical terrorists to gain control of it. The other issue to think about is if terrorists were to attack the U.S., either by releasing chemical and biological agents or by dropping a dirty nuclear bomb, the cost to handle that crisis would far exceed the cost to rebuild Iraq. if a nuclear bomb were dropped on Washington, D.C. or New York City, neither city would be able to operate or be inhabited for 100 years or more. So, I mean, yes, it's a very costly thing that we're engaging in trying to rebuild Iraq, but we've gone and we have to finish our job and we have to do it right, or else, the consequences will be considerable.
Thank you. Riva?
Thank you. Hope said that the Bush administration is working towards making Iraq self-sufficient, but how long will that take? The situation in Iraq is currently woefully underfunded. Troops are going out in trucks that have no armor on them. They don't have enough armor. They don't have adequate weapons. If we're asking these young men and women to defend our country, how can we expect them to do it if we're not giving them the right equipment? In addition, Kerry doesn't want to necessarily add troops. Kerry wants to make an international coalition which will help defray the costs. Right now, the costs of the war in Iraq are 90% American. We were in Afghanistan. That wasn't the case. We had more allies helping us. World War II was definitely an international war with NATO and a lot of different allies. I mean, it wasn't NATO at the time, but the costs were defrayed. Right now, we are basically facing the burden of this war, a war which, again, we're fighting this isn't Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda is still in Afghanistan. We still don't have bin Laden, and yet we're putting all this money and resources into Iraq. I agree, we can't just strand Iraq on their own, but there are definitely other solutions that internationally we can find, as opposed to the current situation, which is just sort of, leaving them there. I mean, Bush administration took the biggest surplus in history and has turned it into the biggest debt in history. And, what Hope is proposing doesn't, eliminate the spending of money. Money is still going to be spent. Kerry at least has plans to try to defray the costs, try to pull out gradually from Iraq, hopefully help them stand on their feet, but yes, make them self-efficient, make them pay the costs, and be able to stand on their own, as opposed to troops occupying the country, which is what a lot of Iraqis feel is the case at the moment. The other thing is that,
Can I say something really, really fast?
Oh, go for it. Just fight.
I just want to point out that, Riva talks about how our troops aren't getting adequate supplies and adequate funding to do their job over there, and, Kerry won't vote for extended funding to supply troops with equipment and to, help them out over there. So I just want to throw that out.
All right. You want 10 seconds to rebut?
Kerry says, the language of the bill is different, and at the same time, there's still, again, the bigger threats right now that they've admitted are North Korea and Iran, and bin Laden is still in Afghanistan. Bush isn't dealing with those issues at all.
Thank you. All right, we're going to jump to a little audience questions here. And this first one's from Chico Mackey, who asked me to say his name. Why can't President Bush admit to a single mistake? Oh, this is for the Republicans, by the way. Why can't President Bush admit to a single mistake that he's made during his 4 years in office? Provocative.
I thought during the debate, he kept saying it was hard work and stuff. I thought he had admitted he made some mistakes. By no means am I a die-hard George W. Bush fan. I think he's done plenty of stuff wrong, but I think in an election such as this, and this is a very historically important thing, and I think if we, down the road, if we are seen quibbling about who has a better drug plan or whose tax cut plan caters to the middle class more, when we're dealing with issues as important as terrorism and stuff, I think history will judge us very harshly. This is an election that I think should be decided, and hopefully will be decided, on the issue of national security. And that issue, I think George W. Bush is 100% correct. There are certain social policies and certain economic policies that he's pursued that I don't think are the correct ones. But I think in the great questions of national security and protecting America, he is 100% right.
All right. Do you guys want to dump on George on that one or not? No? All right.
One thing. On the national security front, the Bush administration, I think, did admit that they made one mistake, or it took them a long time to admit it, but it sort of come out in the last couple weeks, because when all the evidence was stacked against them to show them that they were wrong. There were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and there is no connection between Saddam and Al-Qaeda. I think those are two very significant things to be wrong about, given that that over 1,000 soldiers have died in Iraq fighting this war that we thought we were fighting for reasons that the Bush administration has admitted were wrong.
Thank you. All right.
Can we say something now?
Yeah, 20 seconds.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair to say that it was President Bush who led us into Iraq whenever the majority of Congress voted to go to Iraq at the time. I know it's kind of a cliche throughout this debate to say that President Bush had the same intelligence as John Kerry, but really that's the truth. They had the same intelligence and both voted to go to war. So I don't think you can say that it's President Bush's fault that 1,000 people have died in Iraq or that he led this crusade into Iraq. I think that's unfair.
Okay, thank you. All right, audience question. Both George Bush and John Kerry attended Yale as undergraduates. Considering this warped educational experience, give me one good reason why I should listen to a word they say in educational policy. Is there a legitimate choice in this election for the discerning Harvard student? You guys gonna vote for Yaleys? All right.
Kerry passed.
Hey, Bush went to Harvard Business School, was it?
He was a scholar there.
Yeah.
Dad.
Yeah.
All right. Here we go. Do each of you believe your candidate would make a good teammate, and why?
I think President Bush would be a lot of fun, yeah. Especially 30 years ago.
Laugh at
A
him.
lot more fun.
Yeah, Bush has been accused of a lot of stuff being boring. I don't think is one of them, especially in his younger days.
How about Kerry? He's a hockey guy.
I don't think he'd be a good football player. See that picture with him? Trying to
No, he's not good.
He didn't make it to home plate either on that opening pitch.
Then again, I couldn't catch a football when I played myself. Bang skulls, though. All right, here's a question for Dylan from, I'm guessing, somebody you know. Can you explain tort reform and Kerry's position on it?
I'd like to pass that question. I'll pass to Chris.
Do we have any more audience questions? You guys want to run them up here? Because I'll ask them. I'm crazy. No? Okay. Are we out of time? Oh, we want to do one more, yes. One final question? Okay, the final question. We got a few left, so let's see. We're going to leave this open to the floor, too. Either team wants to jump on this. You can even do 30 seconds apiece. I don't care. Here we go. Let's do. Let me get a good answer out of this one. And I want good critiques here and points for citing work and research. Many people don't understand how the budget works or why we have a deficit. This seems to include both our presidential candidates. Both claim to have a plan for reducing the deficit. Why will your candidate's plan work and the other candidate's not work? Can you answer that one?
Anybody speak?
You know, yeah, I'm going to say anyone. This is the last question. Just throw it out there.
I think I'll take this one.
And I'll ding you if you go too long.
All right, well, to begin, I think some of the problems Bush has had with the budget deficit is he just hasn't explained how he's going to pay for, the projects that he's undertaken. He just hasn't given us a reason or, why or how he can pay for it. He just simply doesn't have the money. Kerry's proposed a pay-as-you-go system, so at least the public will know how he's going to pay for the things he's going to undertake. And he plans on ending corporate welfare, which is, a way of decreasing the budget and rolling back the taxes on the wealthy, which we talked about. He wants to impose a cap on spending also, so you'll know how Kerry spends his money. And if Bush has proposed even more spending and hasn't justified how he's going to pay for it, which is expand the fiscal debt that we have already. So I think the pay-as-you-go system will work. I think it's definitely better than the system we have now. So vote for Kerry.
All right. Who wants the last word you want the last word on this one? All right.
Well, first off, Reva said earlier that it's the largest deficit in history. That's really not true if you look at it. If you look at it in absolute terms, now we have a GDP in the 7 or 8 trillion mark. But if you look past the past recessions, as a percentage of GDP, this is actually one of the smaller ones. So, I wouldn't be too negative about this deficit. Also, if you look at President Bush's tax cuts, if you make his tax cuts permanent and you don't add any new entitlement programs, the deficit will start to shrink by 2008 as projected, and that was a result that was foreseen whenever Bush had the tax cuts. When he had the tax cuts, we had a recession, and President Bush wanted an immediate stimulus to the economy, and that's what he got when he cut the taxes, and now it was the shortest recession in history, and now the economy is growing at a rate that's it's growing faster than it has in 25 years. So I think Senator Kerry's.
Oh, that's a big slip. Wow.
Faux pas.
Oh. Jinxed him.
I have to apologize on that one. Senator Kerry's plan. I don't really think he has a plan to cut the deficit. When I read what he does when he's proposing $2.2 trillion on new spending, but he's only proposing getting in $840 billion more dollars from rolling back Bush's tax cuts. I think if you just look at Kerry's plan, he would actually increase the deficit. So I really don't think Senator Kerry really has like a plan to reduce it, while President Bush has a clear-cut plan that he's had from the day that he first signed the tax cuts.
All right.
Can I say something to that?
Is it going to involve voodoo economics?
Maybe. No, I'd say, Christian said that, the economy's doing better and that the budget is getting better, even with the tax cuts Bush has imposed. But he also said that that's without any new entitlements and new projects. And obviously with the state of the welfare, or the state of healthcare, and with Iraq and the war, and with education, there are new projects need to be undertaken. So that's going to cost more money. So I don't see how that balances the budget and how it makes the budget any better than it was before.
I'm sorry, I need to restate my past statement. When I said no new entitlement programs, healthcare is already a program, as is education, as is unemployment, as is welfare. What I mean by new entitlement program is an entitlement program that does not currently exist, and it doesn't include that doesn't include a change in a current program. It's saying no new entitlement programs, such as like not a new unemployment program or some program that isn't available right now. So I still think that the changes in healthcare are taken into account in the figure that the deficit will start to decrease by 2008.
I'm sorry, the answer we're looking for is neither will ever balance the budget. We will be in brutal debt. No, actually, that's going to wrap it up. Let's thank all our jocks for such a wonderful job. There's some wicked smart kids here. So to let you guys know, first I'd like to thank Nate Pekarsik for putting this together. And good job. And the IOP for letting us in the door, because we're not usually allowed on this side of the campus. And let you all know before you leave that the Red Sox are winning 1-0. Because Manny hit a homer in the first inning. So thank you very much, and have a good night, everybody. Yes, and please grab a bracelet on your way out. Please.
Which team though, seriously?
Lead 1-0.
Joe, as your agent, I gotta tell you, there's only one thing holding you back.
What's that?
A catchphrase. All the great ones had them. That's a winner. Holy cow. You need one too.
Maury, why would I want to play down to the fans for something that doesn't come naturally? Why?
Why? Licensing.
Fly ball center field might go. Home run! Slam-a-lamma!